Senate will come to order. Since the 13th order of business has for final debate Senate Bill 1337. Senator Johnson is recognized to debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good President, fellow senators, I just have some concerns with this bill. I understand what we're trying to accomplish here, but I think there's some other avenues to do that. I have some concerns with how it may be applied in some other circumstances. So with that, I don't support the bill. Thank you.
For the debate, Senator Stinnett.
Thank you, Mr. President, to debate the bill.
You have the floor.
Thank you. Good senators. I had the pleasure of meeting several of my dairymen at the town meeting last Saturday, and this issue, you can imagine, was a pretty hot topic. Most run an exemplary business, and they have no need to worry about being transparent in their practices. My concern is the few bad actors who tarnish the reputation of others. Some processors are concerned about how this will be perceived. They will have to market and sell their products nationally and internationally, and it hinders the image of Idaho agriculture with our customer and the agricultural product to the consuming public. How does this improve and enhance the general public's trust in Idaho's agriculture? Plus, this bill, I frankly admit, is probably too narrow, focusing on one specific industry over another, therefore criminalizes one particular type of speech. It chooses to criminalize speech on agricultural settings, but not in other industries, or laboratories, or hospitals, or restaurants, or Micron, or the list goes on. This elects the restriction of speech in certain settings, while not in others, thus setting up an unconstitutional form of speech restriction. We have the Right to Farm Act already. We have numerous trespassing laws already in statute, but Idaho's whistleblower law only pertains to public employees, not private employees. This bill creates a perception that the industry is hiding animal abuse. Nothing excuses poor treatment of animals. However, the livestock owners have responsibilities like all business people to sell products that are good for public consumption. Senate Bill 1337 not only criminalizes video recording or obtaining records in an agricultural production setting and criminalizes gaining employment through false pretense or entering a premise with false pretense, but also imposes harsh penalties on whistleblowers, journalists, and other individuals who document and expose other things, food safety issues, working conditions, environmental problems. What if your city ends up being polluted by an inadvertent or advertent practice from some ag sector that pollutes the water supply? As an example, the good Senator Fontaine was talking about private versus public lands. I traipse, as many of you do, over a lot of public lands, and frankly, a lot of them are not adequately posted. So if you're inadvertently on property, unsuspecting person, take a photo of something, and you are on private land that is not adequately signed, how would you know? You're a criminal. Senate Bill 1337 would punish an employee who gains employment in an honest manner and who, after working in the facility, witnesses abuses and records them. The whistleblower can then be prosecuted. This section may be in contradiction to federal whistleblower laws. Let's say someone takes evidence to the press and the press airs it. They are then potentially criminalized. This violates the First Amendment's protection of freedom of the press. Now, the good senator had mentioned Temple Grandin, and we know that she's the designer of roughly half of the livestock handling systems used in North America, and she disagrees with the Ag-Gag laws. She suggests that those in the livestock industry should make their own videos to show the public that they have good practices. In a speech before the Iowa Farm Bureau, she says, if I may quote, Mr. President,
having identified the source, Senator may quote Temple Grandin.
You've got to take the mystery out of things. If you don't show it, then there are going to be videos on the internet showing all types of atrocities, horrible things that are going on, and implying that that's the industry's standard practice. Another comment from a National Pork Producers Council policy representative, if I may quote.
You may, Senator.
These types of bills erode public trust of an industry, causing the consumers to think, what are they trying to hide from the public? And attempts to keep Americans in the dark by criminalizing whistleblowers, which are at odds with the core American values of the First Amendment and transparency for an increasing concerned consumer base. It just isn't good business. Thank you, Mr. President.
For the debate, Senator Hill.
Mr. President, would the senator from 26 yield to a question?
Senator from 26?
Yes.
Senator Stinnett, would you yield?
I will, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator from 26. I'm just reading through this, and I'm not doubting what you said, but I can't find, I think you used the words that an employee who is there as a legitimate employee and then finds something and reports it, that they would be held criminally under those circumstances. And I don't see that in the legislation at all. And I wondered if you could help me find that.
Mr. President, it's the lack of being able to direct a person once something like that's happened. He has no avenue to take it anywhere in this bill, and that's what concerns me. It isn't specifically stated what the process would be, and if he hasn't brought it to the attention of the owner and takes that information off-site without having informed his employer, it doesn't say it to take it to law enforcement. It just says that if he makes it public, that then it criminalizes him. It takes it to media or whatever.
For the debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator.
Senator Work.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fellow senators. The types of abuses that have been described are horrible. The scapegoating of families and people trying to do the right things is horrible. And I completely agree with everything that is said about that kind of activity. But that's not actually the specific target of what we have before us. We all know inherently, morally, in our guts, that that kind of activity, victimizing others, stereotyping, scapegoating, that those things are not right. Unfortunately, 1337 doesn't hit that target. 1337 takes a much broader approach, and I appreciate the debate by the senator from 13, I believe it is. No, 11? So I appreciate that debate. You know, in America, we have kind of a proud tradition of things that shock us out of our lethargy, that shock the public to the point where they rise up and say, this isn't okay anymore. Upton Sinclair with The Jungle, for instance, where he worked in slaughterhouses in I think it was in Chicago, and exposed that. And we had people that we had a very unsafe food supply. People were dying in the United States, eating meats that were contaminated. And we made changes because of that. And it was shocking, and it hurt people. And I would say that probably at that time, I wasn't there, but at that time, there were probably people that were swept up innocently into this, were threatened, and were trying to do the right thing, and that was a problem. But the reality is that The Jungle shocked us into doing something different than we had been doing before. If you go into the 60s, Silent Spring, same thing. If it wasn't for Silent Spring, would we still be applying DDT today? How many more babies would we have with birth defects? I mean, you name it. And we could debate whether or not we like Silent Spring or not. I'm bringing it up as a means of an example of the long history that we have of needing to expose wrongdoing. So I don't have a problem with that. I do have a problem with criminalizing behaviors in a very broad sense and then defining where those behaviors are criminalized in another very broad sense. A person could easily get employed someplace, not by misrepresentation, complain, for instance, here we have facilities that are covered. So there could be, for instance, in some kind of production facility, fire doors that have been blocked. And an employee goes to management and says, we've got fire doors that are blocked. There's a problem here. It's not safe. Management says, yeah, we'll take care of it. A couple weeks later, they can complain again. They could end up in a position where they feel the need to record that violation and take it outside and potentially take it to the right place, to law enforcement, to the health inspector, wherever that is. But they are now open to the interpretation by the company that they were hired through misrepresentation, right? Because if you're a good employee, you would never do that. So this must have been a bad employee who was hired and intended to do us harm. And the chilling effect just from that, the clogging of the court system, the desire or need to make the courts make those calls, that's what this leads to. Senators, there needs to be a road where people can do the right thing without fear. There really does. Because we know in our hearts that we want people to do the right thing. And I'll tell you that most people want to do the right thing. Owners of companies, owners of a dairy. I mean, cows on a dairy are what you get your profits from. You don't want to abuse your animals, right? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. But you've got to give people a path, an open path to doing the right thing. If you impede their ability to use what they consider to be a potential open path to report things, then you're doing the wrong thing. And I believe that this bill, unfortunately, because of how broad it is in so many ways, doesn't provide a pathway to doing the right thing. And for that matter, even though I completely feel for and agree with the issues we're talking about and the abuses that have occurred on the other side in victimizing people that don't deserve that, I believe that this bill doesn't hit that mark and doesn't deserve our support today. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further debate? Senator Baer.
You are conflicted.
Not 20, not 21 Baer. 31 Baer.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I got to change these seats around.
It was too good. Senators, ultimately, this bill and this debate is a property rights issue. Everybody here has the right to own, possess, and manage their property. Title 55, Chapter 1 in our Idaho State Code speaks to the rights that citizens have to own and their property, whether it's real or personal. With that right, of course, comes a responsibility and to manage and control their property. One can expect the right to protect his property from potential injury and damage. One should have the right to regulate who has access to his business and to his business records. One should be able to control access to and from his property. And one also should have a reasonable expectation that potential employees are not going to misrepresent their intentions to gain access to property. That's what this bill is about. That's what this bill enables property right owners to do, to be able to control and manage those who enter their property with intent to harm. This is not new language in this bill. If you look in Title 18, Section 7040, you will find words that are almost identical. As a matter of fact, may I read, Mr. President, from Title 18.
Title 18, the senator may read.
Title 18, 7040, subsection C. This is dealing with agricultural research facilities. It says one commits a crime of interference. That language appears also in this bill we're talking about today. A person commits a crime of interference with agricultural research if a person obtains access to agricultural research facilities by misrepresentation with the intent to perform acts that would damage or hinder the agricultural research and experimentation facility. Not new language. As I was doing some research, Senators, I ran across, first of all, a section of code, the federal code, that reads very similarly. It says, may I read from Public Law 374, Mr. President?
Having identified the source, Senator may read.
Thank you. It is an offense for anyone who intentionally damages or causes the loss of real or personal property, including animals or records, used by an animal enterprise or any real property of a person or entity having connection to, or relationship to, or transactions with an animal enterprise. The language exists on the federal level. Why not also on the state of Idaho's level? Earlier, the question arose about the restitution portion of the bill, and there was a concern that double the amount of the damage was addressed. May I read from Title VI, Section 212?
You may, Senator.
It says, and this is dealing with state lands, and this is the way the state of Idaho views that. Trespass on state lands, damage actions. Any person who cuts down or carries off any wood, trees, or timber, or removes topsoil from, or dumps trash or debris on any land belonging to the state of Idaho without lawful authority is liable to the state of Idaho for treble the amount of damages. Treble the amount. And that's not the only code section that there is that deals with treble. I learned a new word while I was doing some research. It's called agroterrorism. And I'm going to go down this road because it's extremely important. Agroterrorism is defined as the malicious attempt to destroy or disrupt the agriculture industry and or the food supply system. We have seen over time a marked increase in agroterrorism in the agriculture business. And it's just happened, a lot of it has happened very recently. About a year ago, just after we got finished with a session, I was invited to go at the expense of the Idaho Wheat Commission and grain producers to go to Portland on a tour. And on that tour, we learned a lot about wheat, but the thing that was really of concern to the wheat growers was that there had been some field, an 80-acre field found in Oregon that had some GMO wheat in it. Now, GMO wheat is not like corn. There's lots of GMO corn in the world. Wheat hasn't arrived there yet. Years ago, one of the large companies did some research on GMO wheat and tried to make it so that it was immune to a particular chemical. That happened from 1999 to 2005, and then the research was stopped. It didn't appear to be economically viable or feasible. So, the program was ended, and they thought all the seed had been destroyed. Lo and behold, in this 80-acre field, in one small corner of that field, they found some GMO seed. It had been likely, although we can't find definitive evidence, but likely because of the way the pattern was in the field, it had been spread there maliciously by somebody with intent to do damage. And it did damage the wheat industry last year. We had immediately a number close up. Japan immediately closed the markets, as did several others. And it took a lot of work and time to get those markets open back up. Another incident that happened about a year ago, on June 8th, 2013. The agro-terrorists went into a privately owned sugar beet field where GMO seed was being dealt with and generated and tested. It was a test plot. There were 2 small privately owned test plots. During the night, individuals went out and hand-plucked 6,500 plants and killed them. I don't know if you know about rag research, but it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. in order to develop a seed and get it to the point where you almost have it to the market and can grow that seed commercially. Destroyed, and I didn't see a dollar value there, but it would have been in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. June 8th, 2012, 14 cattle trucks at a feedlot in San Joaquin Valley in California were burned to the ground by agro-terrorists. I can't see any good reason to burn down trucks. Senators, this bill is about property rights. This bill is about individual property owners being able to protect their property. And I urge your aye vote.
For the debate. Senator Bayer. I'll make that two syllables, strong two syllables.
Thank you, Mr. President, to debate the bill.
You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, good senators, and in the same vein as the good senator from 13, because I can't cover a few points in 60 seconds. It's really to explain my vote. And a lot of good points have been made by the sponsors, and I believe they have some very valid points, but I also recognize the validity of the points made by the senators from 13, 26, and 17. I see the language before me as one that addresses somewhat of a broad issue or a symptom, but with a narrow scope, and that is to say agricultural production facilities as listed in the statement of purpose. I work in a secure medical research lab with animal research. Yes, we benefit from the security of that facility, and I appreciate that, and I understand the logistics of properties that may not have those same luxuries in that sense. We do have to deal, though, with threats and take all those very seriously. But we also have credentialed employees. We have quality control within our facility. I support the property rights and the concepts. I always have. And some of the other citings that were made during this debate are valid and very important. I ask then if the current trespassing and proprietary material and information protection measures that are on the books are insufficient, then they probably are insufficient for all, and I don't understand why we don't take that approach with this type of proposal. In the opening comments, retailers were referenced, but I don't see that referenced in the language. Maybe that can be clarified in closing. In recent years, there have been various attempts to deal with language that would ensure proper management, particularly in regards to ag and animal care, and those measures have fallen short. I see a cause and effect debate here. I do not subscribe to any of the slander or threats or any of the tactics used as some of the examples that have been given, but I also don't subscribe to them in any other arena, whether that be your residence, whether that be a technical company, technical sector, various other sectors. That kind of behavior is inappropriate regardless of the details of it. What I see here is an attempt, and there are measures of validity to it, but I see an attempt to treat a symptom, a bad symptom, admittedly, but not to treat the disease. And with that, I cannot support this language. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further debate? Hearing no further debate, Senator Patrick's recognized to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. I had some fairly long remarks prepared, but I may shorten them some. Food safety is really the issue we're talking about here. I know we got off track a little bit with animal abuse, but it's much deeper than that. And part of this is dealing with proprietary seeds, the sale of germplasm, the theft of seeds, sold overseas. It's espionage, basically. And by having some rules in place, most of this isn't available to the common person. It has to be an employee to have access. On my farm in particular, my employees have access to my locked shed of chemicals, and some of them are fairly strong chemicals, and we use them licensed and we use them properly. But what if, and I go through some employees during summer months that I don't know. What if they decided that they want to make an example of me, poured it in my storage of barley, okay, my malting barley, and now I've got a product that, whether it goes through the whole system or not, I will never sell another pound of malting barley with that kind of a reputation. So the reputation risk is just as important as the damages, and that's part of the reason for the damages in this. I'd like to also mention Northwest Food Processors are in full support of this, and they're part of the people who have been hurt. When you beat up a producer, it goes all the way down the line, clear to the retailer, and we're trying to avoid that. There are many industries that have restrictions on video and trespass. You don't go out to Micron and take pictures. You don't go to the movie theater and take pictures. It's against the law. And especially in the way this is written, when you use them for some purposes that may really hurt the business. The problem we have here is you can be tried and convicted in the press or on YouTube because everything is so available nowadays, and no due process. This is just the way it works, and so we're trying to go through the proper due process. There are plenty of ways to report any kind of abuse, whether it's a chemical spill, whether it's animal abuse. All these things are very easily reported, and a video is unnecessary. If you go back to the examples of earlier in this century, some problems, well, they didn't use videos. It's exposed without it. So I believe that the video isn't necessary. I believe it is the obligation to report an issue, and I don't believe that the employee would be punished, especially if they reported it to the owner as well. But as far as the example of locked doors, well, this employee probably had an obligation to turn that in right away. I know he probably tried to do the right thing, bring it to the example of the business, but it's his obligation as well to report it. If you look at the true damages in our environment with our farms, it's huge. I don't think most people understand the dollars that turn through a farm, and the margins are not that great, but a lot of dollars go through. And by damaging a reputation and damaging the products, you've created a huge economic loss. And the food safety piece has been brought up in Homeland Security and discussions as being a very big concern. And they actually named some organizations that are similar to Al-Qaeda. And we are at risk as a nation of losing a lot of our food to terrorism. And so we've got to be more diligent. This doesn't go far enough, this law. I wish it would go further, but we're open in Idaho. We're open to people, and we trust our employees, and we're just trying to create a little bit of a backdrop here so that we can continue to trust people. But we are at risk for food safety for a lot of reasons, and one of them is terrorism. So I would like to release the rest of my time to the good senator from 10.
Senator Rice recognized final closing debate.
Mr. President, members of the Senate, there's one of the questions I think is in people's minds. Why is current trespass law not apply to protect this problem? And, you know, what if the land isn't properly posted? And these are two important questions. First, if you obtain permission by false statements, when the owner discovers the false statements, he can ask you to leave, and only then are you trespassing. This changes that for these facilities. Second, if the land is not posted against ordinary trespass and you're thinking you're not on land that's posted against trespass and you don't think you're trespassing, you're not. This bill doesn't change that. but it does provide some specific protections against knowingly going into the agricultural facility to do these things. Knowingly. That's important. If you don't know, that's not guilty. And so this is a well-written bill. It does not impact the First Amendment, does not restrict speech, it does not punish any whistleblower. There is not one word in this bill that punishes someone for reporting animal abuse, unsafe practices, blocked doors, contaminated food, not one word. And those reports would be immediately followed up. That's what our Department of Agriculture does. They follow up immediately on reports of contamination into our streams, our ditches, our canals. Immediately. Not waiting days, not waiting weeks. This is a good bill, and I urge your support. With that, Mr. President,
Debate being closed. Question is, shall Senate Bill 1337 pass? Senate Secretary will call the roll.
Baer. Bayer. Bach. Brackett. Cameron. Davis. Vulture. Getty. Guthrie. Hagedorn. Hyder. Hill. Johnson. Keogh. Lacey. Lakey. Lodge. Martin. McKenzie. Mortimer. Nonini. Nuxel. Patrick. Pierce. Rice. Roan. Schmidt. Sidaway. Stennett. Vane. Tippett. Vick. Ward Ingleking. Work. Winder. Davis. Johnson. Lakey.
Mr. President, 60 seconds.
60 seconds, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, I've listened to both sides of the debate. To me, this does not limit the ability for an individual to file a complaint. I think that effective route exists. It does not limit constitutionally protected speech. For me, it comes down to private property rights. This is akin to someone hiring a caregiver to come into their home based on false pretenses, and that person begins videotaping in their home. It's not worth the imposition on the vast, vast majority of good people to catch the very small portion of those that are bad actors. With that, I would vote in favor. Aye.
Senator Lakey be recorded as voting aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Nonini. Schmidt. Sidaway. Winder.
Roll call shows 23 ayes, 10 nays, 2 absent. Excused. Majority haven't voted in the affirmative. Senate Bill 1337 passed Senate. Their correction title. Hearing none, the title is approved, and Senate Bill 1337 will be transmitted to the House.